I guess my point, like the whole takeaway that I would say to people listening to this is go for it, go boldly like you never have before, and make it yourself.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Matt Chastain.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. I am your host, Matt Chastain, as I think they said in the intro just a minute ago, but we're going to have quite an animated episode today. Pun is intended. We have Kristen Collier today, who is an animator. Kristen, I just want to thank you for taking some time to be with us today on the Faith and Family Filmmaker podcast.
Well, thank you, Matt. I'm thrilled to be here and to meet you and to hear. Actually, I'm super excited about your projects. You're doing some incredible work for God, so I love your film, watched it. Very excited to watch it again, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yes.
That's great to hear. It's always great when filmmakers can get together and appreciate each other's work, and it's an honor to hear that. I'm going to go ahead and go into your bio so people get to know who you are and what you've done, because I think what you've done here it's so cool and so amazing, and I think it's something that we can all learn from. So you got a BA in English literature, but during the pandemic, during the lockdown, at age 51, you decided, hey, I'm gonna train myself in a completely new skill. I'm gonna become an animator. Now you have cartoons that have major distribution on streaming platforms. Your first love, obviously, is books. You're an author, and you're excited these days about your upcoming it's out right now, your supernatural thriller called Kings of Glory, which is a love story about the second coming. So I definitely want to get into that. But, I want to start off by, talking about how you became an animator. During the lockdown, I think all I did was trim the shrubs beside my house and cut the grass. I didn't do anything productive. I should have done more productive. You actually got out and learned how to animate. So tell me, how did that go?
Well, basically, at that point, I was determined that my husband's characters were going to be cartoons, even if I had to learn animation myself. And I was admittedly a poser when I learned it. I had no interest in really learning animation. I just thought, okay, I'll learn a little bit, I'll do a little bit here and there, and then eventually I'll get the characters licensed with some big studio that will then take it over and make the cartoons. I never dreamed I'd actually have to put the time in to learn it myself.
Yeah.
And I did it. And the backstory is that I wrote King of Glory before Kevin and I got married. And then when we got married, Kevin was a children's author. So like 18 years ago, he was a children's author and an illustrator. And I also wrote a children's picture book about the second coming. And so when we were married, we got a show that was produced by a Christian cable TV network. We produced 26 episodes. Well, actually, we didn't produce the episodes. We wrote all the scripts and we wrote all the stories that go with them. And the live action was shot elsewhere. And so it was the equivalent of about 40 picture books with all of the art for the stories that went with that. And it was 26 episodes. So due to issues on their end, they ended up scrapping it. So we were sitting on, seriously, the equivalent of 40 picture books. It was a mountain of work, and we were devastated. And we're like, what are we going to do with all of this art and these stories? Well, they were based on Kevin's undersea characters. So then after that, we bought Adobe Premiere, and we proceeded to learn video editing. And we just got the Premiere Elements, the very basic stripped down version for like $100, and it worked just fine. And so we learned video editing, took some time, made storybook videos, and tried to kind of give those away, like just to different entities that would want to host them or whatever. Or, we made a couple of books out of those, but we had previously books as well that were picture books and chapter books. Disney Plus scouted the characters, but as you know, they don't take morals-based characters, even though they really liked Kevin's artwork and said, it was really good and everything. And
I would argue that Disney does have their own set of morals. It just may not align with ours.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that I heard it from an insider that it is killing them that their most popular show, Bluey, they don't own. I just heard this like a week ago. So,
I love Bluey. Bluey's great. Yeah. By the way, I should also say that the opinions of the host do not necessarily reflect those of Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, and certainly not of Jeff and Jacqueline. I have to put that in there every time I open my dumb mouth.
Yeah, well, and you know what, Disney, they definitely have their issues, but when you look at everything they're releasing, like there's nothing new, and people are slamming that because there's nothing new. It's all a rehash of everything they've done for the past 20 years, so people want something new. So basically, over the years, we just kept trying to pursue things and move on and get the characters out there. I think it was 2018, we connected. I'm in Michigan. We connected with the Michigan Christian filmmakers, and there's a lot of them here in Michigan. Wonderful people. And so we started the Michigan Christian Talent Network, which we're no longer really connected to because it was a Facebook group and there was a lot of people in it, but we got locked out of our Facebook account. It was hacked, and so we just don't even have access to that. But anyhow, we got connected to a lot of Michigan Christian filmmakers. And at the time, I was a church secretary, and we said, hey, you know what? Let's make a newsletter to help the Christian filmmakers get better connected, to help them promote their projects. And then we thought, hey, you know what? Let's make it into like a nice magazine, which we did, called Creative Motion Magazine. But we also included people from really all over the country and all over the world. So we wrote articles about other just films and like Vindication, which I know you're a writer on, and all the really cool Christians out there who are making films and actors and everything. And then my husband wanted to take to the next step. He said, you know what, let's put it online and make a Creative Motion online so that we can be more updated rather than a magazine, which we did that. And then his ultimate goal was to make a Roku channel, which I forgot to mention that after this whole thing with our show being thrown in the garbage, we made a Roku channel. I think it was around maybe 2013, called the Christ Clubhouse channel. And that was when Roku was really first getting going, and there weren't many Christian Roku channels out there. And so we had about over 20,000 subscribers. But at that point, like after a year, I didn't know how to get advertisers, and I didn't want to spend any more money on it. And I thought, well, if this is something God wants us to do, then he would provide the means for us to do it. And I just didn't feel like we should spend our own money anymore. And so we shut it down, even though it was a fairly decent sized channel. So then we got involved with the Michigan Christian Filmmakers, and then we eventually then started the Creative Motion Network, which was a Roku channel. And it was like a cutting edge indie Christian Roku channel where we hosted people like Deanna Lane, her awesome Mod Wash Moments show, and others, and a lot of short films and that sort of thing, and a lot of talk shows. And we had that for a couple of years, but then when all the woke stuff was going on, we got deplatformed because some of the talk show hosts on there were very traditional Christians, which, you know, back then you would get deplatformed for being a very traditional Christian. And that was, I think, about 3 years ago. And I was actually happy about that because it was a lot of work for my husband. But we also got connected to some awesome people. Like I did a show called Keeping Up with the Christians where I interviewed people like Todd Terry and Vitas Monique from Vindication, Josh Murray, Jerry Della Sala, who Christopher Shaw he's done shorts with, Josh and Jerry, and just some really wonderful people that we got to be friends with. But when that shut down, I was actually glad because then it allowed us to focus on my husband's true gift, and that is his cartoon characters. So by that point, after about 18 years, I was determined. And so when the lockdown hit, I believe in being a submissive wife. I believe it's scriptural. And so I asked my husband if I could get the animation software, and he said yes. And so I researched very methodically during the lockdown the software, and I got Cartoon Animator, which is a very economical software. It was only like $150 and user friendly, super easy. You don't have to be an artist to use it because it has a lot of templates. So I bought the software and just watched their YouTube tutorials during the lockdown to learn animation. But I have to say that I did learn a little bit of animation, but it wasn't like I said, in my mind, I was a poser, admittedly so. And I wasn't embarrassed about that because I really had no intention of ever actually learning animation. I didn't even really want to. I was just hoping that, you know, I could do a little bit and my husband's characters would get discovered and licensed, and then somebody else would do the work. So that was what I was kind of hoping for. And so I just spent a few months learning that. But also at that time, We had become friends with so many of the wonderful Christian actors, like the people I mentioned, but also Robert Shepard, who was involved with so many great projects. And a lot of these people were in our first cartoon, which is called Benny the Barnacle. And we had wanted to get some notable names in there. So through friends, we reached out to Corbin Bernson's agent, and he agreed to come on for that. And for those who don't know, Corbin Bernson starred in LA Law and Psych. He played the dad in Psych. And so he agreed to be in that. I also reached out to, on Facebook, Marta Kristen, who was Judy on Lost in Space, and Lou Graham, who is the lead singer of Foreigner, and he was just inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year. And so we got all of these people to be in the first cartoon called Benny the Barnacle. Now I have to preface this by saying that this is before I'd ever done any animation, like more than just a couple of short things. So here it is, and I have these wonderful, famous people in my cartoon, and I don't even really know how to animate. And I was so intimidated. I thought, I can't let these people down. They are so talented and so sweet, and they're Christian and so wonderful for agreeing to be in this cartoon. I'm like, I can't let these people down, so I have to really make this cartoon as good as possible. Extremely intimidated. So that was like, 2020, around the fall and winter, when all of this kind of came together, when we got these people lined up. And then I just kind of made a few other short cartoons with an octopus, a red cyclops octopus named Blink. And this ended up being our main cartoon, which I can get into that. But basically, I made a short cartoon with Blink, and then one called Whispering Wally, which is a whale that whispers, because the most important things he has to say, he says with a whisper. And so I did these over the next few months until the next year, I'd say like 2021. I focused on those cartoons to actually learn animation. So I did those and ended up getting a mainstream. Actually, we got a small distributor for those cartoons. And then I was still really learning how to animate. And so I then returned back to Benny the Barnacle now that I learned a little bit with these first few. And this was in like 2021, I guess, like the spring of 2021. I really spent a lot of time learning animation. Like one example, there's a character named Killer the Krill, and he's Benny's sidekick and best friend. And he's actually voiced by Jose Carlos Gutierrez, who is president of Comics 34 Next Generation, which is the biggest Christian comics ministry in the world. And he's based in Mexico City. So it's cool because he's from Mexico. So the character has a cool Mexican accent and also speaks a couple words in Spanish, which is hilarious. And that makes it more fun in the cartoon. So I'm learning this animation. And there's one scene where Killer the Krill is just sitting there eating kelp, a piece of kelp. And on my software, Cartoon Animator, I'll make the clips in Cartoon Animator, and then I put them into Premiere to paste everything together, because you can't make a whole cartoon in the software. It's too big. You can usually you just make really short clips of a few seconds and then paste it into Premiere to edit it together. So in Premiere, the cartoon I could see was glitching. A little tiny piece of kelp, seaweed, out of his mouth kept glitching, like it was like flashing on and off. And in the software, I couldn't see. I'm like, what is this? Why is this happening? Because I had a bunch of layers. It's kind of like in Premiere when you take down the visibility of something to make it disappear, and you make a cut and then you bring it up again to make it flash. It's the same thing with the animation. I had several pieces of the seaweed that was in his mouth, and I would take down the visibility, like put it to 0, and then turn it back up to make it look like he was chewing it. But I had multiple layers of the seaweed, so it really looked like his mouth was full, and it was tiny, super tiny, because he's just in the distance sitting on a rock. And so I could not for the life of me find out, why is this flashing? It's not supposed to do that. It's a glitch. It looks bad. And in the software, you could not see it. It did not show up. But it did show up, this glitch in Premiere. And I spent 2 whole days just trying to find that glitch. I said, you know what, if my name's on this, but also these famous people who I really respect, I'm not going to ignore this and let a glitch go by.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 days trying to find that glitch. It was so hard to do. So I found it, and I just kept working on the cartoon, and it ended up being a 24-minute cartoon, like a short feature.
Wow.
And it's now on Tubi, and I'm still really proud of that. And it came on Tubi 2 years ago. We have a small distributor for that, and it premiered on there. And I'm really pleased with that because Film Threat gave that cartoon a 7. And Film Threat, I really respect them. They're very harsh film critics. They're indie film critics. And I really respect Chris Gore as a film critic. I think he is an excellent film critic. And by comparison, that same year, the Disney cartoon that came out that year, they gave a 3. So I really respect that. That cartoon got a 7.
Wow.
And another reviewer who is a mainstream non-Christian reviewer said that cartoon has the ability to reach the mainstream regardless of your faith. And so that was our goal, to have these cartoons be able to reach the mainstream.
Yep.
Cheryl Felicia Rhodes, who is well known in Christian films, she referred me to a friend, and I can't think of his name right now, but he did VFX for Mission to Mars. So he's an animator, and we got a quote from him years ago when Creative Motion was a magazine, and he said, "Christians don't have the desire to compete in the mainstream." And I thought, well, you know what, I do, because I want to create excellent work because that's what we're called to do. And like there's a quote from Martin Luther. He says, "Don't preach, but make an excellent shoe," something to that effect. So I'm Lutheran. I was raised to pursue excellence because it glorifies God. So that's why I spent 2 days just to find a glitch and a little tiny piece of seaweed that only appears for a second. So when the cartoon came out and we got that great review from Film Threat, that was only last year actually that we got that. And it got on Tubi. And I mean, I know I'm not a Disney level animator, but I did the best I could, and I felt good about that. And I felt like, okay, I did what I could. And Corbin Bernson and the others, I felt like I did not embarrass them by having their name be part of it. And it turns out that Corbin actually liked the character so much, he agreed to stay on as executive producer.
Wow.
Yeah, for the series pilot, which was a half-hour pilot that I made. In the first cartoon, Benny the Barnacle, the feature, he played Wallace, the great blue whale, and he was a blind whale. And this is a quote he said, "With all the projects that come my way, while I give each one my best 110% effort, I often lose sight of the scripts that really touch me. Benny the Barnacle was one project that has never left my mind, or I have forgotten my gratitude for being a part of it and hopefully future part of this great adventure." So the fact that Corbin then agreed to stay on as executive producer for the half-hour pilot that I made afterwards, that to me was a really nice feeling.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you this. I'm going to get nerdy now, but was it a frame rate issue?
No, it's just the software. It's the craziest thing. In the software, like sometimes you just can't see something. Like another example, you know how when you download a transparent PNG and you open it up in Photoshop and you see the black and white little squares of the background?
It's not really transparent. They're lying to you.
Right. Yeah. So you see, there's another cartoon I make for Cherry the Resurrection Rabbit, which it's kind of like Alvin and the Chipmunks. They're singing bunny cartoons. They're hilarious. And it's for a children's charity called Cherry the Resurrection Rabbit. Well, I made one cartoon for the bunny, and there was an image of a circus that I downloaded, and in the software, all you could see was the circus. But then when I saved it and it ended up getting onto Tubi, you could see the gray and white checkered background of the PNG, and it's because I didn't put, in addition, a white background behind it in the animation software, and you couldn't see it in Premiere either. And it just killed me. But nobody's going to, I mean, it's just there for a second and nobody's going to know. But at this point, I mean, I can't change that at this point.
Well, those are the kinds of Easter eggs that if people notice, that means they're really watching your content pretty intently, which that's a good thing. If you can find that kind of an error in something I've done, awesome. That means you've really paid attention.
FAF Association hosts its first Filmmakers Boot Camp on July 27th. 9 workshops. That's right, 9. 3 for actors, 3 for screenwriters, and 3 for producers. Registrants are able to access all the recordings of all 9 workshops with instructors Venus Monique, Jared O'Flaherty, Nathan Blair, Trey and Ariel Fernald, and more. Plus, organized networking to connect you with other like-minded filmmakers. Level up with confidence this summer. Save your seat now for FAF Association's Filmmakers Bootcamp. Go to faffassociation.com and click on Filmmakers Bootcamp in the menu bar. Link is also in the show notes.
Well, I want to go back real quick to this when you talk about the poser mentality. I think that's something that I think a lot of people listening to this are going to relate to pretty well, because we've all felt that way as we get into a new industry that we may not understand. Unless you're already part of a giant system, which a lot of us in the indie world are not, then you're having to figure things out as you go. Everybody is, and we all kind of have that imposter syndrome at some point. And I think that the trick is to push through that. It's cognitive dissonance. Just go through the pain and keep going. I'm reminded of a conversation I once had with Stephen Kendrick. And he was telling me that when they first made their first movie, it was his brother who was the creative. He was the writer. He was the director. Stephen he was a business guy. And he said, all I knew is I was going to put the business part of it together. And somebody, after they made the movie, somebody said, oh, you're the producer. He goes, I don't know what a producer does. Well, that's what that is. What a producer does, handles the business of the movie. So, it's if you'd have said, Steven, I need you to be the producer before that, he'd have gone, I don't know what that is. I'm a poser. But all he did was the job that instinctively he knew how to do, and that's manage the business of a production and just kind of figure it out as you go. So you were doing exactly what successful independent artists do.
Well, and I have to just say this before I address that, is that really quick, the gray and white checkers on the transparent PNG that I was talking about didn't show up in the animation software. So that's what killed me, is that I couldn't see the glitch in the software. And it was the same thing with the seaweed. So it was so hard to fix. But yeah, getting back to the imposter mentality, what's funny is that I didn't really care. I mean, I wasn't embarrassed about feeling that way, because when Kevin and I first got married, we were just focused on books before we got involved with TV. A lot of the authors that we would come across in our different writers groups, I saw a lot of jealousies, mostly from the wives who were jealous of their more successful husbands. And I thought, this is crazy. I am super proud of Kevin. Like, he's been called the next C.S. Lewis. The publisher that discovered him said he would, quote, set the standard for children's literature for generations to come.
That is a pretty high comparison, a high bar right there.
And this publisher was a genius, known for being a genius in the field of creativity. Like, when he met Kevin, he immediately signed him to a multi-book deal and said, don't show your work to anybody, because we don't want anybody to impact your writing style. And so Kevin has won writing awards, best youth fiction. His first book was called A Masterpiece of Communication. And he's illustrated hundreds of books and been an illustrator for cable TV and streaming. So, but I was never jealous of him. I was always, he would always say I'm embarrassing him when I talk about his work, but I'm his biggest fan.
That's awesome.
Also, with having an English literature degree, even before I married him, I knew this guy is a special writer. He is a great literary writer. And so I knew that as well before I even met him. So I was never jealous, but I saw so many in the writers groups, I really noticed it a lot, that the women authors were jealous of their husbands who were more successful. And I thought, that's crazy. You should be excited for your husband. So getting back to the poser mentality, I didn't care that I didn't want to be a real animator, because that was never my dream. My dream was for Kevin's characters to get out there and be discovered. And in my mind, I was an author, and my focus was my book, King of Glory, which is about the second coming. So it wasn't like I felt intimidated or jealous. I just didn't care, because it wasn't my identity of being an animator. But I got a really nice compliment from the guy who is the community manager for Realusia, which is a software company. And he gave me a wonderful compliment about my animation recently. And it's on my LinkedIn page. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but it just stunned me. The comments that he said about, my artistry, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I guess my point, the whole takeaway that I would say to people listening to this is Go for it, go boldly like you never have before, and make it yourself. And that's the biggest message I would have for anybody listening to this. Make it yourself and take the time to learn the skills. Like, because I see so many people, wonderful Christian filmmakers, that they spend years trying to get money and they're always doing pitches. And I see some of the projects they want to do, and it's like, wow, this is such a great idea. Make it yourself and just do what you can with what you have at the moment. Because what I've seen with the creativity that I put into these cartoons, like as a woman, I put different things in there than a man would do. I add a lot of pinks and purples and colors that appeal to girls, and I'm mindful of that. And I add a little more emotion to the cartoons by having some slow pauses and the slow panning into the eyes, that sort of thing. And the men, I think, are more action oriented. So I add a little more of the emotion and things that would appeal to girls, where a male animator isn't going to do that. And also like some crazy artistic things that I've done with some of these cartoons. Like I just did last week one for Cherry the Resurrection Rabbit. Cherry it's a children's charity that helps abused children, started by a lady that started it as like she had a puppet, like she does ventriloquism. Well, and she sings, and she's got wonderful songs. Like she's been to seminary, so her songs are very theologically rich, and they're professionally produced in Nashville. They're bluegrass songs. And it sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks, and they're hilarious. So she has books and many DVDs. So actually 3 years ago now, I got connected through Jack Foster, the illustrator, and I started making cartoons for Cherry. And she's got a musical, half-hour musical on Tubi called Bluegrass Bunny, the musical, and other cartoons on Tubi that I made. Well, I just made one last week. It's called One Way Street, and it's about how I'm on a one-way street and I'm not going to turn away from God. Well, I Googled like beautiful streets. And it turns out there's a lot of beautiful streets in the Amalfi Coast in Italy. So I got all these pictures that I downloaded of streets in Amalfi. So here's this bluegrass bunny in the Amalfi Coast in a carrot mobile singing this song and going through all these hairpin turns in the mountains. And it's hilarious. And that comes out, I think on the 21st. It comes out like in a few weeks.
Okay, I want to stop there just because I think I want to kind of go reiterate the point of, I think, this episode, the lesson of this episode. We're going to bring you back for another episode because we have a ton more to talk about. We're running out of time in this episode.
Okay.
But for me, that is the key. I think so many independents, we're out there going, I just need to be discovered. I just need the right giant system to come incorporate me. But the problem with that is, what did you say about Disney at the very beginning? These giant systems are too giant for innovation. Innovation doesn't come from giant corporations. It never has. Innovation comes from independents who grow their innovation so beautifully because of how innovative and new and creative it is, to the point that then the giant corporations have to come get involved and buy you or distribute you or whatever. But like you said, do it yourself, even if it's a little more low budget. Great ideas and great creative shine through, sometimes a lack of resources and production. So that's the big lesson for this one, and the lesson that you have lived out. So congratulations for that. So Kristen Collier, I do want to thank you for being on this episode of the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. But as you guys can tell, she's just now getting going. So you're going to want us to tune into the next episode as we bring Kristen back. But Kristen, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm inspired. I'm ready to go, and I can't wait to talk to you from the next episode.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been a huge blessing to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast, take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support the production of this podcast, you can leave a tip at faffpodcast.com/support. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.